There's somebody you've been living with every single second of your entire life. You've never been away from this person, not even for a moment. You protect them constantly. You worry about them endlessly. You sacrifice everything for them. Sometimes you love them, sometimes you can't stand them. This person is you. But here's a question that's going to sound strange at first. Have you ever actually met this person? I mean, really met them? Think about it for a second. Your name, that wasn't your choice. Somebody else gave that to you. Your face, that changes every single year. Look at a photo from 10 years ago, and you'll see what I mean. Your job, your relationships, your memories, all of those can shift or disappear completely. People lose their memories to Alzheimer's and dementia. They forget their entire lives. And yet something inside them, something deep, still whispers, I'm still here, I'm still me. So what is that thing? Where does it actually live? And if you can't point to it, if you can't touch it or see it or find it anywhere, then what exactly have you been protecting your whole life? Human beings have been asking this question for as long as we've had the ability to think. Some of the smartest people in history have tried to answer it. Descartes, the famous philosopher, said, I think, therefore I am, like the simple fact that you're thinking proves there's somebody in there doing the thinking. Another philosopher named Hume looked deep inside himself, searching for this self, and all he found was a flowing stream of thoughts and feelings with nobody actually watching them. Sartre said that you are whatever you choose to be in each moment. Every generation, every brilliant mind, a completely different answer. And that disagreement stretching across thousands of years should already be telling you something important. If the self was just sitting there the way your heart sits in your chest, why can't the smartest people who ever lived agree on what it actually is? 2,500 years ago, a man sat beneath a tree in northern India and looked at this same question. And he discovered something that none of the philosophers before him or after him quite figured out. He didn't come up with a new answer to the old question. What he discovered was that the way we're asking the question in the first place is the entire problem. There's a text where a monk came to the Buddha and asked him, who feels, who experiences desire and craving? And the Buddha said something that probably frustrated that monk. He said that question is put together wrong. The real question isn't who feels. The question should be what conditions create the experience of feeling. That might sound like a small difference, just changing one word. But everything the Buddha taught about the self flows directly from that one shift. Instead of asking who, you ask what conditions. And that changes absolutely everything. Now, before you listen to anyone talk about the self, including the Buddha, including me, you have every right to say, prove it. Don't ask me to just believe something. Show me why it's true. And the Buddha actually respected that. He had a word for his teaching, ehipassiko, which means come and see for yourself. So let's actually take him up on that invitation right now. Let's go looking for this self together and see what we find. But first, we need to agree on what we're even looking for. If you say I have a self, then that self has to meet certain basic requirements. These aren't Buddhist requirements. These are just the minimum conditions that any concept of self in any tradition in any time period would need to meet. The first requirement is ownership. If something truly belongs to you, you should have real authority over it, right? If this body is really mine, I should be able to tell it, don't get sick, don't age, don't break down. If these emotions are genuinely mine, I should be able to simply decide, I'm done being anxious now, I'm done being sad. Sure, you can influence your body and your emotions. You can exercise, you can meditate, you can go to therapy, but influence is not the same thing as ownership. A tenant in an apartment can rearrange the furniture and paint the walls, but that doesn't mean they own the building. The second requirement is consistency. The you that existed at 5 years old, at 25, and at 65 has to be the same person. But you at 15 loved things that you at 35 are genuinely embarrassed by. You believed things at 20 that you think are ridiculous now. So which version is the real you? A self that's constantly changing is just another way of saying there is no fixed self. There's only change pretending to be continuity. The third requirement is unity. The self has to be one single thing, not just a collection of parts stuck together. Because if it's a collection, then calling it a self is like calling your closed hand a fist. A fist isn't a new object. It's still just 5 fingers arranged in a particular shape. The shape can change, but the fingers were always there. And before we go any further, if this is already making you think differently about yourself, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We put out content like this regularly, and staying on this journey with us is going to open up things you didn't even know you were carrying. So now, with those 3 requirements in mind, let's actually look at what makes up your experience. The Buddha broke it down into 5 parts, 5 aggregates, and he looked at each one carefully to see if any of them could be the self. First, the body. You can't control whether it gets sick or stays healthy. Every 7 to 10 years, almost every cell in your body has been completely replaced. The body you're sitting in right now is physically different from the body you had a decade ago. And if you want your body to be stronger or healthier or more flexible, you can't just command it. You have to change what you eat, how you sleep, how you move. You have to negotiate with it by changing conditions. The body responds to conditions, not to your orders. And something that only responds to conditions, something you have to negotiate with instead of command. In what way is that actually you? Second, feelings. The raw emotional tone that colors every single moment of your life, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The same song that makes you cry today leaves you completely indifferent next year. 10 years from now, you won't even remember it existed. So which reaction is the real you? If your feeling tone is you, then you change with every single breath. And something that changes with every breath, how is that any different from having no fixed self at all? Third, perception. Your mind's ability to recognize and label what's happening around you. The same person's face looks absolutely beautiful when you're in love with them and completely ordinary when you're not. Perception doesn't just report reality like a camera. It interprets reality through whatever filter you're currently using, and that filter never stops changing based on your mood, your history, your current state of mind. Fourth, mental formations. Your will, your habits, your personality traits, the patterns that feel most intimately and deeply yours. A lot of people point here and say this is the real me. This is the part that chooses, that decides, that makes me who I am. But did you actually choose your deepest values? Did you select which things make you afraid? Did you design how you react when you're under stress? Your entire temperament was shaped by your genes, your family, your culture, painful experiences you didn't ask for, forces way older than your conscious memory. And if you can't simply command your own will, if you can't just decide to stop wanting what you want, then in what sense do you actually own it? Fifth, consciousness itself, the knowing, the awareness. But consciousness never appears by itself. Seeing consciousness needs something to see. Hearing consciousness needs something to hear. Take away the object and consciousness vanishes right along with it. A self that can't exist on its own, that only shows up when conditions support it. Can that really be called a self? So we've searched 5 different places, and not one of them satisfies even a single requirement, let alone all 3. Maybe the self is the combination of all 5 working together. But then you is just a label for a temporary arrangement. It's like the word river. A river is just a description of countless drops of water, all moving in the same direction. The river was never actually a thing. It was always just a process that we gave a name to. There's a teaching where the Buddha used images that really stick with you once you hear them. He said form, your physical body, is like foam floating on a river. It looks solid from a distance, but if you actually try to grab it and squeeze it, there's nothing inside. Feeling is like a bubble on water. It appears and pops in the same moment. Perception is like a mirage you see shimmering on a hot road. Mental formations are like a banana tree trunk. You can peel away layer after layer after layer and you never find a solid core. And consciousness is like a magic trick, vivid and convincing and entirely created by conditions you don't see. And then he asked a question that cuts right to the heart of everything. In all of this, where is the actual substance? That question wasn't meant to destroy you or make you feel like nothing matters. The Buddha was like a doctor. And this examination of the 5 aggregates is a diagnosis. A doctor has to examine the problem clearly before treatment can begin, so this isn't the conclusion. This is just the starting point for what the Buddha actually wanted you to see. So if there's no self sitting at the center of your experience, then what's actually going on? The Buddha never said nothing is happening. Experience is clearly present. Thinking is obviously happening. What he said is that all of it is unfolding without anyone behind the curtain pulling the strings. There's a process, incredibly vast and intricate and completely self-sustaining. And it doesn't need an owner to keep it running. Think about a river. Does a river need someone to make it flow? No. Conditions come together, gravity pulls the water downward, and the process unfolds all by itself. The Buddha described this with something called dependent origination, a chain of 12 links where each condition naturally gives rise to the next one. Instead of just listing them all out, let me show you how it actually works in a moment you already know. You're scrolling through your phone. A message pops up. Someone said something that stings. Now watch what happens next, step by step. Light from the screen hits your eyes. That's contact. Immediately a feeling tone appears, unpleasant. You didn't choose that feeling. It just showed up the same way. Heat shows up when you touch something hot. Then your mind moves. It wants that unpleasant feeling to go away. That's craving. And right behind craving, a story starts building. They disrespected me. They don't appreciate me. The story gets thicker and thicker, and right at the center of that story, a character appears. Me, the one who was wronged, the one who deserves better. But here's the thing, you didn't consciously decide to create that character. One condition just led to another, and suddenly there's an entire emotional weather system with your name on it. Each link in that chain doesn't need a who running it. It only needs the condition right before it. Ignorance, which just means not seeing things clearly. That's a condition the same way darkness is just the absence of light. From not seeing clearly, automatic reactions start happening. From those reactions, awareness directed at objects arises, and the chain just keeps building itself, link after link. There's a teaching where one of the Buddha's main students explained this using a simple image. He said consciousness and what we call the body-mind system are like 2 bundles of sticks leaning against each other. Neither one can stand up on its own. If you pull one away, the other one falls. The sense that there's someone in here living your life. That sense lives right at the point where these 2 things meet. It's an impression created by mutual support, but it doesn't actually belong to either side. Think about watching a movie. You see someone running across a field, but if you slow the film down, there's no motion at all. There are just still photographs being displayed so quickly that your brain creates the impression of smooth movement. Every moment of your experience works the same way. Each moment is like a still frame, a flash of contact, a feeling, a reaction. And because these frames pass by so incredibly fast, your mind stitches them together into something that feels continuous and solid. That sense of continuity feels like me. But if you could see it frame by frame, you'd realize there's nobody actually in the frames. There's only the flickering, so the self isn't something you either have or don't have. It's something being constructed moment by moment by moment through the process of reacting, clinging, and telling stories about what's happening. You don't have a self the way you have a liver. You're weaving one constantly without even knowing you're doing it. And this leads to the natural next question. If you've been weaving this thing your entire life without realizing it, what happens when you finally see the threads? Forget all the philosophy for just a minute. Think about the last time you were genuinely hurt. Maybe someone said something about you that wasn't true, or worse, maybe they said something that was true and you didn't want to hear it. Maybe you lay awake at night with this nameless heaviness in your chest, this feeling that you're falling behind in some race you never even agreed to run. That pain was real. The Buddha called suffering the first noble truth. Not because he was pessimistic or negative, but because he respected your actual experience enough to start right there with what's real. But look carefully at where that pain actually lived. When someone said something that hurt you, was the pain in their words? Words are just vibrations moving through air. Was the pain in your ears? Your ears just received sound waves. Somewhere between those sound waves hitting your ear and you lying awake unable to sleep, a transformation happened. The pain appeared when what was said crashed into the image you carry around of who you are. You feel hurt when reality contradicts the story you've been telling yourself about yourself. And look at how much of your entire life is organized around defending that story. The energy you spend performing a certain version of yourself for other people. The anxiety about how you're being perceived, the way a single criticism from a total stranger can completely ruin your entire day. All of it flows from one single source. The belief that there's a fixed, solid me that has to be kept intact at all costs. The Buddha saw that when you weave a self, you automatically create a defense system right along with it. Anger shows up to fight off threats to that self. Craving shows up to strengthen and feed that self. Delusion shows up to hide how fragile that self actually is. These three poisons aren't personal moral failures, they're structural consequences of building a self in the first place. It's like building a sandcastle right at the edge of the ocean, and then spending all your time and energy fighting the waves. The waves aren't the problem, the location is. And there's an even deeper layer to this. The pain of holding on. You love someone and you say this person is mine. When they change or when they leave, you feel like something was stolen from you. But look really carefully at what actually happened. You didn't lose them. You lost the belief that they belonged to you in the first place. They were always their own person, moving through their own conditions and their own life. The idea that they were yours was just a thread you wove into your own story. When reality pulled that thread out, the whole web started shaking. And you called that shaking heartbreak. There's a text where the Buddha says this clearly. A person who sees how things actually arise and pass away doesn't cling to the idea that something exists permanently or that it doesn't exist at all. When you finally see that you never truly possessed anything to begin with, the fear of losing things starts to dissolve. What felt like devastating loss was really just the end of a misunderstanding. And the end of a misunderstanding, no matter how painful it feels, is actually a kind of freedom. And even deeper than that, there's the quietest layer of pain. The exhaustion of endlessly becoming. Every single morning, a version of you assembles itself. Today, you're the responsible parent. Tomorrow, you're the ambitious professional. Next week, you're the good friend. And when one of those identities falls apart, when you're no longer the person who's loved or the person who's successful, something inside you goes into panic mode. Because a story is ending, and you've spent your whole life mistaking that story for who you actually are. Independent origination, there's a link called becoming. From clinging, becoming arises. Every single time you grab onto a story about who you are, you give birth to a version of yourself that immediately starts aging and dying. Conditions change, that identity cracks, and you desperately reach for the next story to hold on to. Think about how many versions of yourself you've already buried in your lifetime. The child who believed in magic, the teenager who thought they knew everything, the young adult with all those dreams. Each version felt completely permanent while it lasted, and each one dissolved when conditions shifted. And every single dissolution carried grief with it because you mistook the costume for the person underneath. So if you're hurting right now, if you're carrying that deep, ache of feeling like you're not enough. The pain is absolutely real. The Buddha never once denied anyone's pain, but the me that you believe is trapped inside that pain, suffering because of that pain. That me is not nearly as solid as it feels in this moment. It's a story being told, and when you start to see that clearly, not as a concept, but as direct experience, the story naturally starts to loosen its grip. But here's where something really tricky happens. When you hear that the story can loosen, your mind immediately wants to grab that and turn it into a new technique. I should let go. I should practice this no-self thing. I should work on not being attached to my identity. And that impulse, as reasonable as it sounds, is actually the most subtle trap of all. Listen to this sentence one more time. I want to let go of the self. Hear what's happening there. The one who wants to let go is the self. It's just wearing different clothes now, spiritual clothes, and it's way harder to spot. But it's still weaving. There's a text where the Buddha described certain questions as unwise attention. Questions like, what am I? What was I in the past? What will I become in the future? He said that when your mind starts chasing these questions, 6 different kinds of wrong views start popping up, including have a self, I don't have a self, and even through myself I perceive myself. Even the conclusion there is no self becomes a wrong view if you hold onto it as something that I figured out. The mind just takes the teaching and wraps it around itself like a new layer of skin. So if searching for the self is a trap, and denying the self is a trap, and even understanding the teaching can become a trap, then where's the actual exit? It's in that shift we touched on way back at the beginning. The shift the Buddha pointed to when he told that monk to change his question. He said, don't ask who, ask what conditions. The shift is from searching for a thing to simply observing a process. One direction adds more thread to the weaving. The other just watches the weaving happen without getting involved. And here's what that actually looks like in your real lived experience. The next time anger flares up in you, notice the difference between asking, why am I angry, and asking what conditions just gave rise to this anger. The first question pulls you straight into the story. You start thinking about what that person did, what they should have done, what you're going to say next. The second question opens up a tiny gap. You start noticing there was a sound, there was a memory that got triggered, there's tension in my shoulders. None of those things is you. They're conditions arising and passing, and in that simple noticing something loosens. But why is that shift so incredibly difficult to make? Because underneath every individual story about yourself, there's a deeper structure holding all of them in place. The Buddhist tradition calls it wrong view of self, and it's listed as the very first of the 10 fetters that keep beings bound to suffering. It's the deep, unquestioned conviction that somewhere within your experience there is a me. Before society ever tells you that you need to be successful, you already believe there's a you who could either succeed or fail. Before culture shapes your particular worldview, there's already an I standing there ready to claim it as my own view. Wrong view of self is the root, and you don't need to go around trimming individual branches one by one. See the root clearly enough, and all the branches dry up on their own. Now all the knowledge you've gathered over your life, all the values you hold, all the skills you've built, none of that is the problem. The Buddha himself used language and logic and cultural knowledge to teach for 45 years. Knowledge only becomes a source of suffering when you fuse it with your identity. When I know this hardens into this is who I am. The problem was never the knowledge, it was the grip. There's a teaching that describes a chain running in the opposite direction from suffering. Where dependent origination shows how ignorance leads to suffering, this reverse chain shows how suffering itself, when you meet it clearly, can actually lead to freedom. The chain goes like this. Suffering gives rise to faith, not blind belief, but a confidence that comes from honest observation. Faith gives rise to joy. Joy deepens into rapture. Rapture settles into tranquility. Tranquility opens into a deep happiness, and that happiness becomes the foundation for real meditative absorption. From absorption, your mind finally sees things as they truly are. That seeing gives rise to disillusionment, not despair, but a quiet turning away from what you now clearly recognize cannot ever truly satisfy you. From disillusionment comes letting go, and from letting go comes complete release. The starting point of that entire chain is suffering, your suffering, the one you're carrying right now in this moment. When you stop running from it, stop trying to fix it or explain it away, and you turn toward it with steady, patient attention, it becomes the very condition that leads to awakening. Ignorance creates suffering moving forward through the 12 links, but suffering, when it's clearly seen, dissolves ignorance moving backward. The key was always right there in the lock. You were just looking for it somewhere else. And the wisdom that comes from this, what Buddhism calls panna, it's not knowledge the way we normally think about knowledge. It's not information you collect and store. It's the direct seeing that happens when your mind becomes still enough and honest enough to observe its own machinery without flinching. The moment you see, really see, that what you've been calling I is being assembled right now by conditions, out of contact and craving and old habits, and that not one single part of that assembly is actually you, something shifts that cannot be undone. It's the difference between reading about fire in a book and holding your hand near an actual flame. One gives you information, the other rearranges you from the inside out. There's a moment in the ancient texts that has stayed with me for years, a moment of complete silence that says more than any words ever could. A wanderer named Vakshagota came to the Buddha and asked him directly, "Is there a self?" The Buddha stayed completely silent. Vakshagota tried again, then, "Is there no self?" Still total silence. After a long, uncomfortable pause, Vakshagota just stood up and walked away. Anatta, who was sitting nearby, asked the Buddha why he didn't answer. And the Buddha said, if I had told him there is a self, I would have reinforced the exact view that keeps people trapped in suffering. But if I had told him there is no self, he was already confused and in pain, and he would have thought that the self he believed he had was now destroyed. He would have just fallen from one type of suffering into another type. Both answers would have given Vakshagota something new to hold on to, and holding on is the entire mechanism of suffering. The silence itself was the answer. So throughout this entire journey, we went searching for the self, and we didn't find it anywhere. We watched how the mind weaves one moment by moment through conditions. We felt how that constant weaving creates pain, the pain of defending something that isn't there, the pain of holding on to things that can't be held, the pain of endlessly trying to become something solid. We saw how even the desire to be free can just become another thread in the web. And I think all of this leaves you right here with your hand closed into a fist. You've been holding that fist shut your entire life, and inside it you genuinely believe is everything that actually matters. Your identity, your worth, your entire place in the world. And the thought of opening your hand absolutely terrifies you because you think that emptiness will mean having nothing at all. But what if you finally opened it? Not because someone told you to, not because it's the spiritual thing to do, but because you've done the real work. You've examined every single place the self could possibly be hiding, and you've seen with your own clear eyes that it's not there, because it was never there in the way you spent your whole life imagining it was. And so slowly, with real understanding, you let your fingers unfold. And when you look at your palm, it's empty, completely empty. You never held anything. You never lost anything. And somehow that emptiness doesn't feel like loss at all. It feels like finally setting down a bag you'd been carrying for so long that you completely forgot it was heavy. The weight had become so familiar, you thought it was just part of your body. But here's what remains when you open that hand. Life remains. The sound of rain hitting your window, the warmth of someone's hand in yours, the ache of genuine compassion when you see another person struggling, all of it is still here. Actually, it's more vivid than before because it's no longer being filtered through the constant question of what does this mean for me? When there's no me that needs defending anymore, experience doesn't get smaller or dimmer. It opens up. It gets bigger and clearer and more immediate than it's ever been. The Buddha asked you to do one thing. Look closely. Look with real honesty. And when you look closely enough, long enough, patiently enough, you finally see there was never anything to find in the first place. There was never anything that needed to be let go of. Just a river flowing. And you, finally, no longer trying to hold water in your closed fist. In that openness, in that complete untrenching, something ancient and quiet settles into place. It was always there. Underneath all the noise, underneath all the stories, underneath all the desperate grasping, just waiting patiently for you to stop and actually look. That's what the Buddha sat with under that tree 2,500 years ago, a seeing, simple and direct and patient. And that seeing, that clear, honest, patient seeing, is the door that's been open this entire time. If this teaching reached something real in you today, if it touched a place that needed touching, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to Buddhism Focus. We share profound teachings like this regularly to help you see more clearly and live more freely. Share this with someone in your life who's searching for answers, because sometimes one teaching at exactly the right moment changes absolutely everything. Until next time, may you walk gently through this world with open hands and clear eyes.